and welcome to a video on global warming. The following video is to highlight on what is global warming. We will cover topics such as what defines global warming, how does it affect us, and to answer a common question, does it truly need that much attention? Global warming is also known as climate change. It is the observation of century-scale rise in the average temperature of the Earth's surface. There have been observations made from as early as the 1950s. In 2013, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, concluded that human influence is the dominant cause of the observed warming since the 20th century. Climate change and its effects differ between regions. Some common effects include increase in global temperature, rise in sea levels, changing precipitation, and expansion of deserts in the subtropic regions. The most commonly known or talked about global warming disaster is the melting of the glaciers at the Arctic and Antarctic, which has caused sea level to rise. This rise in sea level, according to scientists, has washed away seashores, thereby reducing the size of landmass and creating more chances of destruction due to some naturally occurring phenomena such as a high tide during a full moon. Warming is greater on land over the ocean and greatest in the Arctic. Other likely changes include more frequent temperature difference such as heat and cold waves. In recent years, summer temperatures have risen, droughts have become more frequent, unexpected heavy rainfall has caused floods in some regions and heavy snowfall in others. This drastic change in temperature can cause species extinction because some of their natural processes such as migration, hibernation, and so on are interrupted. Possible responses from society towards global warming include mitigation by emission reduction, by converting harmful emissions or using resources such as electricity, adapting to changes such as creating sandbanks around the shores to block out high tides from washing away land masses, building systems that can help to recover from global warming effects by using better alarm systems. Public have taken notice to global warming and have come up with multiple awareness programs to help curb the problem. Conventions and conferences have started that bring together people and inform them of what is happening worldwide. What to expect in the coming slides. What were the observations that caught people's attention? Global warming didn't happen overnight. Most of the reasons for the start of global warming are all man-made. To make tasks such as traveling and so on easier for people, the side effect of doing so was not evaluated properly or not taken seriously. Now, pollution from emissions are one of the main causes of global warming. In this section, we will look into what caught people's attention to climate change. What were the initial causes of temperature change? Temperature change was observed only when the extremes were met. Until then, no one took notice of it. In this section, we will look at what causes the temperature change. Observed impacts on the environment. When something as drastic as climate change happens, it is expected to have its effects on the environment as well. Observed impacts on society. As the environment changes, it affects the society as well. Once an abundant water resource becomes dry, this affects every living being that live around this water resource.
How was global warming discovered? Global warming was discovered by observing the changes in global temperature and the changes in regional trends and short-term fluctuations. In the period from 1880 to 2012, the global average surface temperature has increased by 0.85 degrees Celsius as confirmed by multiple independently produced datasets. In the period from 1906 to 2005, Earth's average surface temperature rose by 0.74 degrees Celsius. The rate of warming almost doubled in the last half of that period. Since 1979, the average temperature of the lower troposphere has increased between 0.12 and 0.135 degrees Celsius per decade. The land temperatures have increased about twice as fast as ocean temperatures. The probability that these changes could have occurred by chance is virtually zero, hence indicating this about global warming. Since the beginning of industrialization in the 18th century, the temperature difference between the hemispheres has increased due to melting of sea ice and snow in the north. In the past 100 years, average Arctic temperatures have been increasing at almost twice the rate of the rest of the world. What started it all? Below are the main causes of global warming: greenhouse gases, aerosols and soot, solar activity, variations in Earth's orbit. Let's see each one in detail. Greenhouse gas effect. The greenhouse effect is the process by which absorption and emission of infrared radiation by gases in a planet's atmosphere warm its lower surface and atmosphere. The major greenhouse gases are water vapor, which causes about 37 to 70% of the greenhouse effect, carbon dioxide, which causes 9 to 26%, methane, which causes 4 to 9%, and ozone causing 3 to 7%. Clouds also affect the radiation balance through cloud forcings similar to greenhouse gases. Human activity since the Industrial Revolution has increased the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, leading to increased radioactive forces from CO2, methane, tropospheric ozone, CFCs, and nitrous oxide. Fossil fuel burning has produced about three-quarters of the increase in CO2 from human activity over the past 20 years. The rest of this increase is caused mostly by changes in land use, particularly deforestation. Over the last 3 decades of the 20th century, gross domestic product per capita and population growth were the main drivers of increases in greenhouse gas emissions. Aerosols and soot. Solid and liquid particles known as aerosols produced by volcanoes and human-made pollutants are thought to be the main cause of global dimming, which is the gradual reduction in the amount of global direct irradiance at the Earth's surface. They exert a cooling effect by increasing the reflection of incoming sunlight. In addition to their direct effect by scattering and absorbing solar radiation, aerosols have indirect effects on the Earth's radiation budget. Sulfate aerosols act as cloud condensation nuclei and thus lead to clouds that have more and smaller cloud droplets. These clouds reflect solar radiation more efficiently than clouds with fewer and larger droplets, a phenomenon known as the Tommy effect. This effect also causes droplets to be of more uniform size, which reduces growth of raindrops and makes the cloud more reflective to incoming sunlight, known as the Albert effect. Soot may either cool or warm Earth's climate system depending on whether it is airborne or deposited. Atmospheric soot directly absorbs solar radiation, which heats the atmosphere and cools the surface. In isolated areas with high soot production, such as rural India, as much as 50% of the surface warming due to greenhouse gases may be masked by atmospheric brown clouds. When deposited, especially on glaciers or on ice in Arctic regions, the lower surface can also directly heat the surface. The influences of atmospheric particles, including black carbon, are most pronounced in the tropics and subtropics, particularly in Asia, while the effects of greenhouse gases are dominant in the extratropics and southern hemisphere.
Solar activity. The sun is the source of most of the energy that drives the biological and physical processes in the world around us. Solar activity, like sunspots and coronal mass ejection, cause the amount of electromagnetic energy being received by the Earth from the sun to vary. Over the time scale of millions of years, the change in solar intensity is a critical factor influencing climate, like bringing about ice ages. However, changes in the rate of solar heating over the last century cannot account for the magnitude of rise in global mean temperature since the 1970s. Variation in Earth's orbit. The Earth's orbit approximates an ellipse. Due to its eccentricity, the Earth is closer to the Sun during certain points in its cycle and further away during others. The Earth's eccentricity, however, is always so small that variation in solar irradiation is a minor factor in seasonal climate variation compared to axial tilt and even compared to the relative ease of heating the larger land masses of the northern hemisphere. Environmental impacts. Some of the environmental impacts of global warming include extreme weather, which means longer droughts, heavier downpours, sea level rise, ecological systems like coral reefs being impacted, long term effects like decrease in production from food crops, and large scale and abrupt impacts. These will be discussed in detail in the next slides. Extreme weather. Changes in extreme weather and climate events, such as a heat wave and droughts, are the primary way that most people experience climate change. Human induced climate change has already increased the number and strength of some of these extreme events. Heat waves. Heat waves are periods of abnormally hot weather lasting days to weeks. The recent heat waves and droughts in Texas in 2011 and the Midwest in 2012 set records for the highest monthly average temperatures. Droughts. Higher temperatures lead to increased rates of evaporation, including loss of moisture through plant leaves. Even in areas where precipitation does not decrease, the increase in surface evaporation and loss of water from plants leads to more rapidly drying soils. An example of a recent drought occurred in 2011 when many locations in Texas and Oklahoma experienced more than 100 days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Both states set new records for the hottest summer since recording began in 1895. Heavy downpours. Heavy downpours are increasing nationally, especially over the last 3 to 5 decades. The heaviest rainfall effects have become heavier and more frequent, and the amount of rain falling on the heaviest rain days has also increased. Floods. Flooding may intensify in many US regions, even in areas where the total precipitation is projected to decline. Different types of floods, like flash floods, urban flooding, river flooding, and coastal flooding, are prevalent over all of the United States. Hurricanes. There has been a substantial increase in most measures of Atlantic hurricane activity since early 1980s, the period during which high-quality satellite data was available. These include measures of intensity, frequency, and duration, as well as the number of strongest Category 4 and 5 storms. Changes in other storms have also increased since the 1950s, and their tracks have shifted northward over the United States. Other trends in severe storms, including the intensity and frequency of tornadoes, hail, and damaging thunderstorm winds, are uncertain and being studied intensively.
Our ocean levels are getting higher. Why is this happening and what can we do to stem the tide? Core samples, tide gauge readings, and most recently, satellite measurements tell us that over the past century, the global mean sea level (GMSL) has risen by 4 to 8 inches. However, the annual rate of rise over the past 20 years has been 0.13 inches a year, roughly twice the average speed of the preceding 80 years. Over the past century, the burning of fossil fuels and other human and natural activities has, has released enormous amounts of heat, trapping gases into the atmosphere. These emissions have caused the Earth's surface temperature to rise. The oceans absorb about 80% of this additional heat. The rise in sea levels is linked to three primary factors, all included by this ongoing global climate change. Firstly, thermal expansion. When the water heats up, it expands. About half of the past century's rise in sea level is attributed to warmer oceans simply occupying more space. Secondly, melting glaciers and polar ice caps. Large ice formations like glaciers and polar ice caps naturally melt back a bit each summer. In the winter, snows, primarily from evaporated seawater, are generally sufficient to balance out the melting. Recently, though, persistently higher temperatures caused by global warming have led to greater than average summer melting as well as diminished snowfall due to later winters and earlier springs. This imbalance has resulted in a significant net gain in the ratio of runoff to ocean evaporation, causing the sea levels to rise. Ice loss from Greenland and West Antarctica. As with the glaciers and ice caps, the increased heating is caused by the massive ice sheets that cover Greenland and Antarctica to melt at an accelerated pace. Scientists also believe that meltwater from above and seawater from below is seeping beneath Greenland's and West Antarctica's ice sheets, effectively lubricating ice streams and causing them to move more quickly into the sea. Let's move on to the ecosystem. The definition of an ecosystem is a functional unit that results from an interaction of abiotic, biotic, and anthropogenic components and are a combination of interacting, interrelating parts that form a unitary whole. Ecosystems vary in size. They can be small as a puddle or as large as the earth itself. Basically, any living and non living thing interacting together that can be considered an ecosystem. That brings up the question that what are the effects of global warming on the ecosystems? With global warming on the rise and species and habitats decreasing, the chances of ecosystems adapting naturally are diminishing. Many different parts of the ecosystems are being affected. Global warming could have many impacts on the fish and other aquatic species. Some bodies of water may become too warm for the fish who inhabit that area. Therefore, the amount of oxygen in the water may decline, leaving pollution and salinity levels to increase. More than 20% of the world's freshwater fish have become extinct, endangered, or threatened in the recent decades. A 20-inch sea level rise will cause large losses of mangroves in southwest Florida, and communities of wet prairie will decline with the rise of that sea level. Increased salinity would occur from rising seawater into the Everglades from the Florida Bay. The increase in salinity would also cause damage to the freshwater ecosystems that contain sawgrass and slough. Water is undoubtedly a natural resource that is essential for the maintenance of an ecosystem viability. Precipitation will change dramatically along with other logical climate conditions. Plants will also have the ability to adapt to the changing climate. If global warming continues to keep growing, the rainfall patterns, storms, and cycles of flood and drought will occur, causing rapid changes in the range and distribution of plants worldwide. All plants and animals everywhere will be affected in some way. Are the effects of global warming really that bad? Short answer yes. Even a seemingly slight average temperature rise is enough to cause a dramatic transformation of our planet. 8 degrees Fahrenheit. It may not sound like much, perhaps the difference between wearing a sweater and not wearing one on an early spring day, but for the world in which we live in, which climate experts project will be at least 8 degrees warmer by 2100 should global emissions continue on their current path. This small rise will have a grave consequence, one that is already becoming apparent for every ecosystem and living things, including us. According to National Climate Assessment, human influences are the number one cause of global warming, especially carbon pollution we cause by burning fossil fuels and the pollution capturing we prevent by destroying forests. The carbon dioxide, methane, soot, and other pollutants we release into the atmosphere act like a blanket, trapping the sun's heat and causing the planet to become warmer.
Hi, I'm Navoday, and I will be discussing about the impacts of global warming and how we can overcome them. What are the possible ways to tackle the problem? So, coming to the impacts, I would like to say that global warming is expected to have far reaching, long lasting, and in many cases, very devastating consequences for our planet. And the gradual heating of Earth's surface, oceans, and atmosphere is caused by human activity, and that has been established by a large number of scientists now. So, the major impacts uh, can be ranging from economical to lifestyle changes, and there has been increase in average temperatures across the planet, and there have been temperature extremes in various parts of the world. There have been extreme weather events which indefinitely cause changes to our ecosystem and affect it. There have been cases of ice melting, melting of glaciers at a very fast rate, which in turn depletes the fresh water, drinkable water supplies for the humankind. It has also had very adverse effects on the Earth's ecosystems, and it is expected to be very profound and widespread. Many species of plants and animals are already moving their range to higher altitudes as a reason of warming temperatures, and this has been confirmed by studies from various academies. Coming to social effects and the distribution of effects, because it is not the same currently in every part of the world, but it is distributed very unevenly and some parts are very worstly affected. So, as dramatic as the effects of climate change are expected to be on the natural world, the projected changes to human society may be even more devastating. So, agricultural systems will likely be dealt a crippling blow due to this, though growing seasons in some areas will expand, but the combined impacts of drought and severe weather, lack of accumulated snowmelt, greater number and diversity of pests, and a lot more issues will arise. Economy, which in turn will surely be affected by such things. So now going forward to next slide, and it is about the impacts on society. So human inundation, that is one of the results that will be happening due to the global warming. Like for example, the coastline of US is highly populated and approximately 25 million people are living in an area which is very vulnerable to coastal flooding. So coastal and ocean activities such as marine transportation of goods, offshore energy drilling, resource extraction, recreational and tourism things are integral to the nation's economy, and it generates around 58% of the national gross domestic product, that is the GDP of US. So anything related to global warming will affect the coastal areas in a variety of ways, and they are sensitive to sea level rise. So such changes will affect the habitat inundation, and in turn will affect the economy as well. There can be many more effects to the economy, like natural disasters have taken a toll on the economy in last 7 years. Like Hurricane Harvey this year costed $180 billion. In 2015, the drought in California costed $2.7 billion, and there have been numerous such cases throughout the history. Next will be infrastructure. So all these expenses that the countries have incurred due to the global warming disasters have been majorly due to the infrastructure losses. So it's like, for example, I will say like in 2014, the polar vortex in the US developed and shrinking the economy by 2.1%. So it's always in terms of billions of dollars, and that always affects a country's economy very badly. So I will come to the next part where we will discuss about what are the possible responses about climate changes. So concerns about climate change have led to the development of various legal frameworks and a lot of steps, including national regulations and international protocols to limit the emission of greenhouse gases. But current mitigation measures, however, may not be sufficient to limit global warming to an average of 2 degrees Celsius, which was like since pre-industrial period we have not been able to do that, and that is something we have agreed upon as a society on the whole world. All the countries have decided on that. Other approaches may therefore be required, including adaptation measures and climate engineering initiatives. Only a few legal frameworks are available to regulate adaptation initiatives currently, and to constrain the climate engineering approaches, there are certainly not too many laws and approaches. So it is never well known whether what are the potential side effects of those climate engineering activities. So we have discussed about the current knowledge about expected climate change as a basis of the definition of future international climate policies. So that will be it, and it is a growing problem around the world. So I will request each and everyone to take care of it and stay healthy. Thank you.